I have Sam here today, who is from the Aboriginal Sports Services Council, as well works at the Native Canadian Centre and volunteers with First Story Toronto as a tour guide. Hi, Sam. Thank you for coming in.
Hi.
First, before we begin the interview, I'd like for you to recognize the land that we are on.
Well, I'll recognize that we are in the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and that there are diverse indigenous populations that live here as they always have been, and that really the parallels between our diversity pre-colonization and post-colonization are very equal.
And what is the significance of recognizing the land?
Well, it certainly sets precedent that, civilization didn't start here. When Christopher Columbus first stepped foot, or when the town of York was created, it makes sure that, we understand where our history is coming from so that we can know where we're going.
Mm-hmm. And if you can share with our audience, what nation are you from?
I'm Anishinaabe.
And as mentioned earlier, you work in a variety of different capacities with Indigenous organizations across the city. Can you share with me what type of work that you do? What's involved within it?
Well, I like to say that I'm a nation builder, and it's not like I'm building a nation from scratch. I'm just taking what we used to do for the Anishinaabe and reasserting that this is our way and that this is what we do.
So actually last weekend, I had the opportunity of attending the First Story walking tour. And I strongly encourage you all to Google them right now or whenever you get a chance to. They do walking tours all across the city of Toronto, and they mark heritage sites and buildings and tell stories of our Indigenous peoples within this city. The reason why I think the tour is so important is because oftentimes as Torontonians, we don't recognize our Indigenous peoples as a part of our population. So it's very easy to not realize that they played such a significant role in our city, in our relations, what Toronto is like today. So during this tour, I had the opportunity of being led by Paige. She was one of the volunteers at First Story. And the first thing that stuck out to me is the fact that we looked at the street names across downtown Toronto. Queen Street, Victoria Street, King Street. And that is the very first place where we see the erasing of Indigenous peoples within our land. Can you describe more to that?
Well, certainly that erasure of Indigenous culture and Indigenous presence is something that's common across all colonial states. Mm-hmm. Like, this isn't unique to Toronto. This is, everywhere there's an Indigenous population that has been colonized or is in the attempted process of colonizing. One of the tools to do that is to actually erase, just blank slate. And I think that Toronto has almost been very successful with that. But the Indigenous population here has been really resilient in the way that we reassert we need a reclamation of spaces for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I say reclamation because it was ours to begin with. Mm-hmm. And it's shared space. I'm not saying that anybody owns anything. It's just that on a nation-to-nation level, in the Toronto situation, we need to make sure that all sides are represented. Mm-hmm. And so I'll look at a street like Spadina. And Spadina actually is from the Ojibwe word Ishpadina, which means high place. Mm. So a lot of people don't know that. They think it's Italian or they think it's Spanish. But it's like, no, that is Indigenous. And then I'll look at the words of or the histories of some of the streets like Dundas or Davenport, where they have such extensive histories that stretch back tens of thousands of years as major pathways, the original highways of this land. And people don't know that. They don't know that when they're walking down Davenport, they're following the steps of my ancestors who walked down that same path while they're portaging from the Humber to the Don. Mm-hmm. They don't understand that there's these tens of thousands of footsteps beneath them that hold such energy and spirit. And it's about Indigenous people reasserting that that's there and that it needs to be respected. Mm-hmm. And that if we are to be in a nation-to-nation relationship, all sides need to know that.
It's really important. I agree. And that's why I was such a big proponent of attending this walking tour, as well as knowing that a lot of our street names have been anglicized. Etobicoke and Mimico are original Indigenous languages. Am I correct, Sam?
That's right. But even for any regular Torontonian, the word Toronto is Indigenous. The word Canada is Indigenous. The word Ontario is Indigenous. We all speak indigenous languages. We just don't understand that we know them.
Or even recognize them to be. So on the walking tour, it brought me to Egerton Ryerson, which is the statue that's located here on Ryerson University. And I learned some really interesting information about Egerton, actually very, very upsetting information, that he was one of the big proponents of residential schools to begin with. So somebody that we acknowledge of being the pioneer of creating our public school system has a very dark, racist, discriminatory past.
Standing in front of a statue of Egerton Ryerson, after whom Ryerson University obviously is named. So he's a part of the story of residential schools. And a part of early Toronto history in many respects. He's commemorated here as being the founder of the public school system in Upper Canada, now Ontario, and the system was adopted across the country. The goal, like that of all Christian missionaries, was to change the way Indigenous people thought, worshipped, lived, and spoke. And he helped establish a school there, a day school in the community. But his view of education for, European kids living in Toronto at the time, and his view of education for Indigenous kids were different. But the fact that these schools had such a limited scope, it was prejudging that these kids did not have the potential to do more.
So we just listened to the clip of Egerton Ryerson and his role in residential schools. And I know today that Ryerson University is doing a lot to reconcile for the fact that the university is named after him. And there is an Aboriginal support, an array of Aboriginal support services available here at Ryerson University. So I do commend the university of recognizing the dark past that's involved in the person that they're honoring and to see what they're doing now to fix that.